as we really flourish in our masculinity, as we're strong, as we're driven, as we have purpose, as we have backbone and all that stuff, a woman feels, okay, I can lean against his frame and all those worries about sexual vulnerability, I can release.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome. My guest today is Giff Lasta, who is author of The Way of Men with Maids and is also a coach. And I'm excited for a great conversation. So welcome.
How's it going, Ryan?
It's going great. I'm very excited to be talking to you. So first of all, thank you for writing this book. It was kind of like, love that you wrote it, but a lot of it was like, why has no one told me this before?
It's crazy.
So let's dig in. Tell me about this book, The Way of Men with Maids.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the story of the book is kind of a little fun in that I've been doing marriage coaching online. Basically, I kind of got my marriage kind of back on track after conquering a porn addiction about 8 years ago. And part of that journey for me looked like, okay, how do I get the bedroom? How do I get sexuality in a good place in my marriage after all that? And I went on quite a journey, discovered a lot about male-female dynamics. And once I kind of got my own house in order, I ended up doing a lot for group. I got a group of guys together in my church. I ended up coaching a lot online. And I've got a program called Reforge Marriage. Anyway, doing a lot of this stuff around intersexual dynamics in marriages. But as one of the guys in my local group at my church was reading it, he's the youth group leader, and he said, Giff, my high school boys need this. Like, this isn't just for married men. This, like, all of them, they need 95% of this content. Some of the mechanics and instincts around the bedroom, maybe not quite yet, but most of this applies directly to them. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to make another video course for them. And he's like, actually, the Gen Z guys, they're sick of Zoom calls. They're sick of video courses. I'd like to hand them an old-fashioned book. I think that would have more reach. So I wrote a book, and the rest is, well, developing history.
Yeah, I mean, something I love, just already out the gates talking about porn addiction, just the raw authenticity and honesty that you have, and you poured that into this book. I'm thinking, like, just as a man growing up in the church, there was some line, I forget exactly how you said, about like the level of shame of like just, accidentally looking at a girl's rear end,
Yep.
No,
that's bad.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't do that.
Just from an early age, 13 or so, just like the shame I put on myself around my sexuality, and you have like addressed that head on instead of kind of in a vague way, just kind of trust God. You give us like very concrete ways to direct that energy. Could you flesh that out for me?
Yeah. So the opening of the book, right? Like I do talk about that, what it's like growing up in the church around, puberty and everything else, and I call it like you're being aware of your sex drive for the first time. And there's some, what is it? There's awareness that having a sex drive as a young man is not a bad thing. Okay, there's like head knowledge that that's true. But if you dig into what people actually mean by that, the message that a 13, 14-year-old boy is getting is very confused, because he's weirded out by all this, because it's not something he's ever encountered. The world is 100% permissive about it. And then in the church, there's this like, well, you're struggling with lust now. And so it's very easy for young men in the church to get the message that your sex drive is just lust. And it's the deadly sin of lust. If your eye is, you're walking down, your eye is drawn to, a woman as she's walking down the street, and you notice her wide hips. Oh, that's bad. That's sin. That's the devil. And actually, that's your male biology, like trying to look to find mating opportunities. Now you have to discipline that. You have to shepherd and direct it. But just the acknowledgement that, hey, we've got a male biology. We are driven by a sex drive that's meant to key into other aspects of our lives. Um, just having that on the table is revolutionary, much less actually knowing how to use it. And so that can actually, I don't know, that can free men up to like, okay, I don't need to be ashamed of being a man in the church.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I feel like going through normal adolescence and puberty as a man, regardless of what culture, is going to be difficult just because your body's changing, your brain's changing, your hormones changing. But you look at like kind of the secular world, and there's kind of this dual nature of just kind of give in to all like the lustful nature of kind of like a libertine mentality, and also kind of the Me Too aspect of like, your libido is kind of toxic masculinity, and then you kind of enter the church and like you see things in like Song of Solomon that you quoted, where it's like your breasts are like two fawns and your secret place is like a goblet of mixed wines, and you're like, somehow this is okay here, but like when I take it out into the world, like this feels so dirty. Like this is such a tough thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, that's true. Our instincts around that. I mean, we talk around it. I think that's one of the things you mentioned about the book. I don't talk around things. I just say things as they are, and I see an almost virtue, especially when you're talking to men trying to solve problems, in just being very brash and frank about sexuality, because otherwise, you use a bunch of euphemisms. You're kind of fuzzy, multiple steps away from the problem, rather than just right there spit it out. Right. I have a lot of that with the guys. And it's one of the things, honestly, Ryan, that like surprises me by the reaction of many people to the book. Is like I've got a review on Amazon by a woman, and she says this book is excellent. I think it's suitable for a boy as young as 12 years old. Now, on the one hand, I speak more frankly about sex and about the male drive than just about any Christian book I've ever read. And yet when people are reading it, they're like, actually, kids need this young. And so we've gotten into this pattern where we're speaking around things. We're used to speaking poetically and fuzzily about things. And that's not helpful for guys in general. I don't know that it's helpful for people in general. Definitely not helpful for a 12-year-old.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's 100% true. It's so frustrating. I guess in the world generally, but in the church a lot, it's a lot of like fuzzy kind of quasi spiritual happy talk that doesn't really give you any clear cut advice. But like your book is so direct, so many concrete tools for you to start applying immediately. Like I just love that.
Well, it's, I mean, the interesting thing about it, one of my strongest influences, the guy who helped coach me out of porn, who helped guide me through this process in myself, his name is Mark Kweppet. And
was that the guy who wrote the foreword?
Yeah, he wrote the foreword of the book.
Yeah.
Mark, the thing that amazes me is he sees his task and has seen it for so long as translating the ethos of Christianity and sort of Christian theology, Christian instinct, Christian anthropology into the language of self-development. And so to the point where it's like, what Christianity teaches about a man's relationship with God, what it means to be a man in the world, what it means to be a human being in the world, and ideas of inherent dignity and everything else that you have before God. But taking the fuzzy talk and translating it into brass tacks, making it all actionable and clear for being able to set goals and plans and everything else. And that's a piece that I think we often lack in the church. On the other hand, the world of self-development often lacks some of these hidden treasures that we have in the faith. Particularly, I mean, the biggest one is the bombshell of inherent dignity before God. That you have something powerful in you, you have value, you have worth, that you're worth sacrifice. You're worth your own pain and sacrifice, whether or not your status is high or low. That's hard for a lot of like guys in the secular manosphere to like masculinity movements online or whatnot. Secular masculinity movements to really ground that in anything or embrace. because they're like, no, I have to earn it or I'm piece of crap, right? And the thing is that in the Christian faith, we have this idea that we have this inherent dignity, but that doesn't mean we just sit on our laurels and don't try to better ourselves, right? It gives, if anything, that inherent dignity gives us the courage to know that our dignity won't be lost when we give our all. And so we're free to give our all without that extra layer of existential fear. And I think in the church, and I do explore this in the book, the problem that we've had in the church around these issues is that we often see our inherent dignity in Christ implicitly as grounds to just rest, and we say it spiritually in like a Sabbath sort of way, but the idea is that our inherent dignity actually gives us ground to like light our fire and work with all of our heart. In the Protestant world, maybe we're a little concerned about going into like works righteousness or earning our salvation or something like that. But for masculinity, it is crucial that we push ourselves into increasing kind of our status in whatever worthy endeavor we're trying to shoot for.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, I feel like you would fit in well at my church because I think my pastors speak a lot to people who are kind of paralyzed by kind of a vague Christianity and making like a call to action. One of the slogans that my pastors say a lot is God can't steer a parked car. You know, I forget how exactly you worded it. I was looking for the quote. You know, God's fury is reserved for the men who don't even try. Right. You know, and talking about, I forget how you said it, but God's going to redirect your passions. Like, just go out there, take a risk, take action. And I feel like in the church, a lot of times it's like, well, I don't know what God's will is, so I'm kind of paralyzed here.
Right.
Like, I love how you.
Wait. Yeah. And that is a part. There's one of the boxes in the first chapter about how we see these characters in the Bible. Well, first of all, before we even look at the Bible, we have this sort of tribal knowledge in the church that what is really spiritual is this sense of serenity, waiting, kind of resting and receptivity towards God. And it's not like there's nothing to that, right? There is a time and a place and a posture where that's valuable. But the idea that we need to just sit still and pray really hard, and then God will reveal the right course of action to us, and then we can go out and know it'll succeed. That's not how a lot of life works. A lot of life works where we take our incomplete knowledge, we do pray, we do put it all before God, and then we do our absolute best. And then we fall on our faces and fail, and we lift up and we learn from it, and we offer our pain to God, and He then helps us tweak that and move forward again. And it's in the process. It's in the process of the dirt under our fingernails, the hard lessons, the failures, the trying it, and just the willingness to give it all we've got. And if you look at Scripture, that's a lot more of what you see. You don't see so much of just like person prayed and waited, heard perfect plan, went and executed perfect plan, success. It's much muddier. And then when you look at the Old Testament saints, especially, and the New Testament ones, I mean, Peter and Paul and all of them, as well as David and Gideon and Samson and, Daniel, all these people are men in motion. They are active. They're going out and doing things. And before God gets a hold of them, they're doing things that are destructive a lot of times. But God doesn't say stop doing things most of the time. He says, I like the fire. I like the passion. I want to adjust the aim. But we're taught so much in the church that just a passive receptivity is the spiritual posture. And there's some really interesting reasons for that, Ryan, actually. I don't know if you've ever read Nancy Pearcey's book, The Toxic War on Masculinity.
No.
I've got it right over here. I'll do a little plug for her.
Nice.
Nancy Pearcey wrote this book, and she basically she's looking at a lot of the attitudes towards masculinity and towards like male-female relationships. and she does this little historical tour in the US where she goes back to the colonial period, the Industrial Revolution or revolution, and sees how men and women have kind of related and seen each other. And one of the fascinating things that she's tracing over the course of that, she actually quotes David Murrow, who's up there, is the way that the churches have seen masculinity as kind of a sinful adjacent thing in our instincts. And we've seen femininity as a more spiritual, moral thing. And the way we got there is actually quite fascinating. But where we are at the end, and David Murrow did this study, is he took these two columns of attributes. Column A were things like receptive and affirming and accepting and patient and kind and relationship oriented, all those things. And then column B were things like driven and risk taking and task oriented and keying into results, stuff like that. And they just put those columns out there in surveys in churches all over the country and said, okay, which column is more reflective of the values of Jesus and his followers? And 95% pick column B.
Wait,
now the interesting
is that male or female?
Well, that's the thing. There's just two different value systems. It's not, but it's male and female who are affirming. Yeah, I mean, maybe the men were a little different than the women, but overall, on average, it was like 95% pick column B. These are the values of Jesus and his followers. Now, where David Murrow got the contents of the two columns was from the old classic, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And so the assumption in the rank and file among, the majority of evangelical churches or churches in general is that to be spiritual, to be like Christ, to be a Christian is to kind of be like a woman, like to have the values that are traditionally associated with femininity. And yeah, that's quite a tricky thing to try to navigate in the churches. It's an implicit assumption in the way that we're taught things. And how we got there is interesting, but
gosh, that's so fascinating. And I feel like one of the things I'm grateful for is like some good, healthy Christian understanding of masculinity that you've presented, because I feel like the general dichotomy from a lot of the secular world, it's kind of this all masculinity is toxic in some way, and like a real man is like this kind of emasculated guy who just kind of goes along with whatever the feminist messaging is. And like in the biblical world, like you're saying, like there's something
we got our own version of it.
It's like a feminized Jesus that we've kind of recreated. And then like there's kind of this response to that. I don't know if you saw like Andrew Tate recently, like a real true alpha male has a harem basically and things like that.
Absolutely.
For me, like as a Christian man trying to look at the world and navigate what is a healthy masculinity, it's so difficult to find like good examples like you.
Yeah, it is tough. Well, I mean, and there is a little bit of, I don't know what the word for it is, but I mean, I get irritated by it because, I mean, let's be real here, Ryan. I'm a software engineer who got his marriage together, right? I didn't like go into coaching and counseling or study masculinity and femininity in like psychiatry or anything like that as a field, right? There are people who are professionals who are tasked with guiding our society on these questions with whole research institutions behind them. And there should not be room for me, to have any there shouldn't be room in the market for me to write this book. And so we're in this situation where, as a whole society, we've kind of failed in just transmitting and teaching good intersexual dynamics between men and women. We've got a whole cultural blind spot around this, and we're having to crawl out of it. The fun thing about that is that where there is kind of wholesale abdication of responsibility, there's also opportunity for a lot of exciting exciting stuff. It's like I talk to guys over and over again that I'm coaching around this marriage stuff, and there's eyes opening, and the amount of power they feel in their relationships, and optimism and hope, and reliably, guy after guy after guy. So that's really exciting. But I recognize that if we were healthy, there wouldn't be a lot of opportunity for me to be doing this.
Well, I'm finishing my internship as a clinical mental health counselor, and I can say my profession is completely and utterly dropping the ball on this issue. So I mean that's why there's a space for you, is because probably 80% of my profession is female. It's highly feminized. Even like any kind of concept, any form of therapy that even hints at masculinity is kind of dismissed or viewed as suspect, I guess. So
Right.
there's a huge opening for someone like you, definitely.
Well, we'll see where things go. I mean, I am really excited about the book in the sense of bringing this to the church, because I mean, there are spaces where you can get some of this information online. Problem is, online it's mixed with a lot of attitudes towards women that even I would call quite toxic, right? I mean, you mentioned the Andrew Tates, there's some of the red pill manosphere stuff. There's some of the stuff those guys say, but much, much worse is the stuff that the guys say who just kind of orbit around them and vent just resentment and black pill hopelessness. And so a lot of guys, they're frustrated, and then they take their frustrations and channel it, not into making things better, but into just stewing and like spiraling and making things worse for themselves.
I feel like someone who is either not familiar with you or making a bad faith argument could kind of lump you into that red pill manosphere. Like you're writing a book for men, essentially. How would you distinguish yourself from incel, black pill, manosphere, red pill, like that whole like world?
Well, my secret sauce, the big differentiator between me and those guys, because you're right, we do talk about a lot of the same things. My trick, I don't hate women, even a little. Like, not even a little. Like, I think women are fantastic, and I think the things in their nature, the way that they're kind of wired to respond to us, even the things that irritate us as men, completely makes sense from where they're coming from. And that's actually been a huge surprise for me as I get messages and interactions online, reviews of my book, whatnot, from women, which you wouldn't think, okay, this is a man's book for men. Why do I have, 25, 30% of my followers are women? And the answer I keep, one woman gave to me was, hey, if you're writing a book on how to be as a man attractive to women, you can't be surprised that message is going to attract some women, right? But the thing that I hear from them over and over again is, wow, when I read you, I feel like I'm given permission to be a woman. Like there's not something wrong with me, that I'm not being more like a man here, all these men are complaining about the way that I'm being, but I feel it in my heart. I feel these instincts in me, and it's actually okay because it makes sense. So
that's really interesting, because the book is for men, obviously, but it touches on an important point that like the current state of masculinity is not meeting women's needs. Women's needs are not met by these bitter, resentful people who hate women, and it's also not met by people who are almost like afraid to disagree with women and afraid to step up and take a leadership role.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And women complain about it. Now they have their own language that they use to complain about it. They talk about things like the emotional labor they have to carry, or the mental load in relationships. And I tell guys, those are code words for leadership. Now, that's not politically correct to say, but who in an organization carries the emotional labor of the organization? Staying up at night, worried about whether the people are going to succeed, or who's carrying the mental load, worrying about all the the contingencies and all the things that have to be taken care of. It's the CEO of the company. Right? It's the guy, it's the president, it's the guy in charge. that's carrying all of that weight on his shoulders because he cares. And the big thing that women are complaining about in marriages is, I feel like it's all on me. I feel like I have to worry about all these things, and he just puts his feet up. And he doesn't care. He wouldn't care if it all went into hell in a handbasket. Um, can he just engage? And if he engages with initiative, with the sort of leadership model I put forth in the book, I talk about the captain and the first officer, that sort of ethos with her and around her. Now, the feminists among us will not like that. They will not like that explicitly said. But if you just act like the captain, if you take ownership, you start taking initiative, you start saying, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. Honey, I'd really like your input on this. Or, honey, now that we've made this decision, I'd really like you to handle this part because I think you do a fantastic job. Do you think you're up for it? Like, you start acting that way, most women love it. And they just jump on it. And so, but a lot of people's concept of leadership is just someone who gets his way and bosses people around, which is terrible leadership anywhere in society, in the military, and in companies, and yet somehow that's what people think leadership in marriages.
Yeah, you have this quote. It's from a box called "Girl Talk on the Internet." I think it's women speaking on forums, I'm guessing.
Yeah. No, it's just stuff I've run into on X.
Oh, okay.
That can grow.
So the quote is, "A woman's brain can't relax until she feels safe, both physically and emotionally. Many men don't realize the energy women spend ensuring their safety. Creating a safe environment allows her to fully embrace her femininity." And the next woman talks about, like, when I'm safe, I can turn my brain off. Like, I think that's such an interesting thing for men to understand, that kind of natural, like, unsafety that women kind of live with, that you can step into that role and provide that sense of safety.
Yes, that's absolutely huge. And guys they just can't underestimate how important that is to the way women are wired. And trying to say, what's the best in on that? I mean, there was this meme a while back with, like, this is why we choose the bear. And you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'd rather run into a bear alone in the woods than a man alone in the woods. And the guys are like, y'all are idiots. You don't know how dangerous bears are, and we're not that bad. And, like, they miss the message that a lot of the women were trying to get across, is that we really don't feel safe. We feel very nervous if there's a guy that we don't know. The amount of sexual vulnerability we feel, you guys just don't understand how all-encompassing that is to our feelings of moving around the world. And I want to communicate, like, in the secular masculinity, like, movements, the way, insofar as they've had real success in understanding women, sometimes for very nefarious purposes, right? The pickup artists or whatnot who are trying to get the woman to go home with them in the bar or whatnot. The core insight that lets them succeed in this is understanding the psychology of female sexual vulnerability, right? So because they feel vulnerable, because they care about the sort of sexual risks they take in the world, they will be looking for a certain kind of man to sort of ease those feelings of vulnerability. And the thing that a lot of men have gotten wrong over the past several generations around this is they say, oh, a woman needs to feel safe. That means I need to be nice. That means I need to be harmless. But that's not what they mean. That's not the thing that makes them feel secure. That's why there's all those tropes about the women going after the bad boys. It's because the bad boys, got the tattoos and the leather jacket and the bike and everything. Nobody's going to mess with that guy. And so if I'm on his train, I feel safe and free. And it's more like that. As we really flourish in our masculinity, as we're strong, as we're driven, as we have purpose, as we have backbone and all that stuff, a woman feels, okay, I can lean against his frame and all those worries about sexual vulnerability, I can release. Now, when I say sexual vulnerability, I do want to explain that a little bit. This basic biology stuff, but we don't, guys don't think about it because sex is such a win in our heads. It's just like, wow, if I could have sex with a pretty woman, I'm a Christian, so I shouldn't want to do that with anyone but my wife, but I feel the desire, right? And so in our heads, sex is just this fun win. But for a woman who, sex can mean pregnancy and, childbirth and nursing and everything else, traditionally speaking, or going back biologically, that is a huge risk. That's huge mortal danger, and it's a huge investment of resource and life that they don't have that many shots at. And so the idea that that could ever be forced on them, or that they would be in a situation where they have to do that with a man who isn't really reliable or not good seed or whatever, is existentially terrifying to them. And so with sexuality, they mix sexual desire with a lot of sexual dread. And it's the man who can soothe that existential dread in just who he is that makes her feel tremendous relief and freedom.
That's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of this discourse around, chiding women, or women saying like, why do I always date jerks? And a lot of nice guys saying like, yeah, why do you date jerks?
Me. I'm right here.
Yeah. And there seems to be like this trade-off that doesn't get spoken a lot, of like her saying, I would love to date a nice guy, but I need that confident masculine energy. And if I can only choose one, I'm going to choose that confident masculine energy in a jerk rather than going for a nice guy that's going to leave me exposed. Does that
right
resonate?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, and I think like there's a certain amount where there's some real serenity and enlightenment for a man that comes from accepting that masculinity matters for a virtuous man. That's strength, and developing yourself in physical fitness, being confident, having a spine, having a sense of drive and vision and purpose for your life, where you're going on a journey, and you're not going to be pushed around. That is actual virtue. That's not just personality.
So one of the things I'm doing here, I've had a couple people on, like yourself. I mean, different kind of fields, like evolutionary psychology or different things, but trying to crowdsource my own dating advice.
Okay.
I'm 38 years old. I struggled for a number of years with drug addiction, alcoholism. That messed up the whole relationship thing. I became a Christian about 3 years ago, trying to get on track spiritually, on track with relationships. And, the dating world's kind of tough. One thing I've noticed is I follow your advice a lot better if I don't care that much. If I care a lot, I fall into that, I'm just going to agree with everything this woman says. I'm going to treat her really nice. I'm going to be the nice guy. There was a time, a couple weeks ago, I went to Christian speed dating with two guys for my Bible study. And I had a long day at work. I was seeing clients, leading groups. I was kind of a little bit mentally checked out. I was cool as a cucumber, like very confident. The one girl whose number I wanted, I got her number. But there's other times where it's like I put this woman on a pedestal and I become like this nice guy who kind of retreats from that masculine energy. How can I follow your advice even when it really matters to me?
Well, I think that's the key to dignity, and that's where actually we've got a leg up as Christians with those other guys, because the best you can do from the more secular camp on this is to say fake it till you make it, right? Just really, really try to act and think like you don't care. In the Christian world, we've got this concept of the Imago Dei, of your sort of identity in Christ, that Christ has looked at you and said, you are worth it. You have value. And I have staked my reputation as God and as Christ to identify with you and identify you with me, right? That's what baptism is, right? It's like you are sort of merging into me. So so basically that means that that's true of Christ is true of you as far as your core dignity. But then you have a desire for it really, really to be worked out in the world. And so in this dating situation, um, what that comes down to is there's a part of us that says, okay, I need her, right? I need her because if I had her attached to me at the hip, then I would have this trophy. Then I would feel like a man, right? Then I would feel like I'm valuable. Um, and I could feel breathe a sigh of relief. Um, but that energy right there, and the Christian word for it actually is idolatry. And so what
Mm.
just know that that's what you're struggling with in that moment. It's like, oh, well, you're just a little timid, whatever. No, you're struggling with the sin of idolatry, right? You're putting her on the pedestal that only God deserves, and you're saying that unless I get her, I don't have dignity, which is a lie, and it's selling Christ on the cross, short. Repent, right? Like you can have a hard edge around this dating stuff because that is truly what you're doing in that sense that God has called you as a man and has set your feet upon a rock, and he said, you are secure in Christ, and I've given you a mission and a vocation in the world, and your job is is to live it out and reflect that dignity in your status in the world. And so, how do I do that in this situation? If I'm showing up as the man I want to be in this situation, then I feel happy because I'm letting that dignity out. If I fall short, then I feel frustrated with myself about that, but not existentially so. I still can like rest in that dignity and know that it's secure. So that's how does that land with you, Ryan?
It's kind of interesting. I was reading Luke 21 in the Bible this morning, and Jesus is talking to his followers about like some horrible stuff is going to happen. There's going to be wars and famines, but like nothing can touch you like as my child. Like you're always going to be mine, basically. And what's resonating for me is like even if you ask her out, she says no, you're still my child. It's like applying it to a little bit different scenario, but I feel like logically, I understand nothing's going to happen to me if I ask her out and she says no, but somewhere in my head it gets spun out like my entire future could collapse if this goes wrong.
So the key there is to be attached not to the outcome but to the process. So there's this: I'm going to be happy if I'm successful, and I'm going to be sad. You're rightly disappointed, right? Our emotions exist for a reason. So I'm going to be rightly disappointed if I fail. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to define success and failure differently. You need to define it in terms of your own frame, not living in her frame. And so the way you define that in your frame is that if I show up in that interaction with confidence, if I don't if I don't behave inauthentically, basically agreeing with things I don't agree with, or just being a yes man, if I affirm the things I'm about, if I ask probing questions, if I push myself to be uncomfortable, all those things, at the end of the night, I have succeeded. And if I don't do those things, if I just toe the line, then I have failed and we need to regroup. And so with that mindset, you can be happy even with the no, because you're proud of yourself for pushing yourself. And I mean, I do the same thing with married men. I have because married guys actually struggle with the same thing if things aren't going well sexually. They're struggling with that same feeling initiating sex with their wives because they're going to get rejected. She's going to say no. She's got a headache. She's got, whatever. The same feelings, right? It's your own wife, but you're having to do that. And one of the assignments I give in Reforged Marriage is this week you're going to get rejected for sex. And so the same assignment I would give you as a date, you're going to get rejected by 3 girls for dates. And if you don't get those 3 rejections, you failed the assignment. And what's funny is sometimes the guys actually have trouble. I've had several guys who, one of which his wife was totally cold to him, like they hadn't had sex in a long time, and basically the way I put it was, okay, you're going to go in straightforwardly, get rejected for sex, and then the next item on your list is something else fun you've planned to do with yourself. So it's just an item on the checklist. You're just going to go through, let's take care of the rejection. Okay. Hey, honey, you want to have sex? You know? And and what he found was she was like, okay. And and it was and he was like, wait a second, that was just something I was getting off.
I didn't
my
expect you to
list.
say yes.
I didn't think he would say yes. And he was with this particular, it blew his mind. He's like, wait a second, I have been assuming that the problem is all on her end because I mean, nothing I'm doing is helping. And then all of a sudden, because I kind of set up, right, this mindset, he came at her with a completely different outcome independent, no nonsense mindset. And she completely jumped on board. And, I joked with him. I'm like, well, at least in sex, push the envelope, do something she's not comfortable with. So she says, get rejected for something, right? Or you're failing the assignment. And so if in this dating thing, if you can say, no, I don't care how many dates you get, but you better come back with 3 rejections or you're sitting on your hands. You're not pushing yourself enough.
That's so fascinating. I can't remember the exact stat, but something like half of Gen Z men have never asked out a girl. And it reminded me of this story you told. By the way, this is like such a book that men would want to read. But there was a story that you told, a story of 3 different Civil War generals. I think it was Grant, Lee, and McClellan, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was like, McClellan was like considered this all-star general and like had never lost a battle, but had never really tried, had never really like taken any risks. And when it came to actual battles, like a tough battle, he got smoked. But like Lee and Grant had like skinned their knees and had some bumps and bruises. And when it came to tough battles, like they were prepared. I feel like that's such a good analogy for like, if you've never asked out a girl, like never gotten rejected before, like if you've been rejected 12 times, you know that you're going to survive. You're not going to stop breathing if she says no, I feel like that's such a good analogy there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was very much true of McClellan that he hadn't tried or that he hadn't taken enough risks because he was deep down, because he had nothing but success in his life, he was deeply scared of failing. And that's was ending up being crippling. And so really a lot of what we're overcoming as men in this whole process is overcoming the fear of failure, getting really comfortable with failure and leveraging it in this kind of iterative, oh, sweet, I got another failure to like probe for like, okay, why did that not go well? Do a postmortem and learn some more stuff. This is awesome. When I was helping guys recover from porn, it was the same thing about relapses. You would go on and on, oh yeah, doing well for another week or whatever. And then boom, relapse all to the beginning. And it's like, all right, let's get on point. Let's absolutely like postmortem every bit of it. What was your mindset? Resurrect your mindset at the moment. Tell me, I would get them to write like, what is the best pro-porn argument you could make in that moment that's going to make me relapse because I'm just reading it. It's such a potent emotional argument. And they would write it out. And then you would look in this argument, this way that his mind was thinking in the moment. And there's like all these parts of himself that he's neglecting, all these good insights that he has been suppressing by not listening to his primal mind in the moment. And it would end up being those relapses that were key points in transformation that ultimately led to success. So true, just down the board, those failures, if they're part of an agile, iterative loop, are going to launch you to ultimate success.
Very interesting. So like I was saying a second ago, my church is big on taking action and shaking you out of, pseudo spiritual passivity. And a lot of the times when the pastors are talking about dating, they say, you're probably overthinking this, and you're not big enough to mess up God's plan. But I feel like so many of the singles in my church, myself included, a lot of times get stuck in this, like, what if I choose the wrong person and it messes up God's plan for my life? There's like this whole cosmic design and I screwed it up because like I choose the wrong person. Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, I mean, I guess it gets back to what we were saying earlier, right? That God's actually, how do I put it? He's not all that easy to miss. Like his plans aren't actually all that easy to miss when you stay in communication with him. God will flatten your misguided efforts. You know, he'll stop you in your tracks. He'll lay you on your back. And so, but if you're just staying completely still, uh, like a scared rabbit or something, not sure what to do, there's it's actually harder for him to guide you when you're doing that. The great thing, Jacob in the Old Testament or whatever, man, he did stuff, right? He did stuff all over the place, scheming and doing all this crazy misguided stuff, and God found him, right? And so I'm not saying to just like throw God to the wind and just do whatever you want full bore all the time, but you do need to be in motion. You do need to be acting, and while you're acting, stay in communication with God and let him redirect you where you screw up. But I think that paradigm of expecting to be moving, expecting to be making choices and trying things, expecting to screw up and expecting God to be there for you and helping you adjust, that's a much, I mean, how does it feel to think of your life being like that versus, well, I just got to wait for God's plan and I sure hope I don't miss it. I mean, which life do you want to have?
Mm, mm. So I've seen even in the church some of this like red pill manosphere, incel, black pill, that kind of discourse penetrating even the minds of like men in the church. And I hear people like would say something like, that's nice what you're saying, but that doesn't apply to everyone. You know, it hasn't worked for me. Like women only want 6'5" alpha chads who make six figures. Like, you know, I'm not even going to try because your advice is not going to apply to someone like me. What would you say to that person?
Well, it's not true. You know, I mean, there's there's a lot of, I need to be able to be patient. I need to be able to be patient with guys like that because it's very easy to dismiss that kind of frustration. But I guess you could say, what do you, well, there's a question of what do you want out of life? Do you want to be the kind of guy that looking back said, it was too hard and I gave up, right? Because I didn't want to spend the effort when, when it probably wouldn't have worked out well anyway. Or do you want to be the guy disappointed? I tried my very best and things didn't work out. Which of those two are better? Because there's a certain like satisfaction that comes from giving your all, even if you don't succeed. There's a satisfaction with yourself. There's an ease of conscience, and a joy in the journey for doing just that. So assuming they're right, assuming there's just, the odds are, heavily stacked against them. There's the saying, I'm trying to remember which movie it was from, but there's some ancient Roman saying about this guy at the gates that says, how can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers in the temple of his gods, right? Like he was going to stand alone and he knew he was going to die, but he's like, what better way to live than to die like that? And that is a very masculine ethos, and to sort of rise up in our hearts, even assuming that the odds are against us, even assuming that this is the last moment of humanity when we're going to have, AI take over and turn us all into little slave drones. Well, I would want to be the guy on the bridge fighting to the end. And there's something now in the Christian faith, we say, and that guy on the bridge fighting to the end, giving his life in a hopeless cause, rises from the dead and conquers the world. And that is the stone the builders rejected that became the cornerstone. And that is actually how we do things. So that's a Christian ethos, and that level of hope and that level of defiance of despair. So that's one answer. The second answer has to do with the thing, just understanding what truly attract women. and to not be fooled by these narratives that say, oh, I'm only going to be satisfied with this, this, and this. Um, that actually it's what those things signify more than those things itself. Women want the goose that lays the golden eggs, not the golden eggs themselves, most of the time. And so the things that women end up wanting in men have an incredible overlap to the things that men are just satisfied having on their own right. So you don't have to go out and pursue these like hopeless, these like, yeah, this fool's errand trying to give her all the things that she wants in her checklist. Actually, her soul, like her whole feminine posture is designed to respond to you being your best self, you being the man that you want to be anyway. And so there's just so much about it that's worth doing and is exciting doing. And so I would look at that and say, what part of that isn't appealing? What part of that doesn't sound like just a fantastic life?
Hmm. So a lot of what you talk about is advice for men and how to attract and deal with women. I'm wondering if you flip the script ever and you could advise, say, a younger Christian woman on how to deal with men, like what she needs to do to make herself attractive to men, like that kind of advice on the flip side.
Yeah, I feel particularly ill-equipped to do that. For example, I have 4 sons and 0 daughters. You know, and I feel a little presumptuous speaking to women. Having said that, I feel a little more confident speaking to women than I have in the past with the amount of women who've come and said your message really resonates. So I think the answer that I would give is that like women shouldn't have to do a lot of this. Women are not really equipped to help men become men, which is often where the bottleneck really is, because femininity is inherently responsive and she can be the best woman ever. And if the guy doesn't have that masculine initiation, the relationship won't really get off the ground. And so there is a kind of heaven and earth relationship with masculinity and femininity. The rain has to come from heaven first, get soaked up by the ground, and then the ground produces fruit. And so the place where women are often really stuck is, well, how do I kind of let him know what he needs to do? And while not feeling like not feeling like it all depends on me, because that kills my attraction to him. And so I think that's one way that this book could actually be useful to women, because it lets them know at least what he's struggling with, what his path looks like, and have a little bit of sympathy to it, because women aren't really wired to be all that sympathetic to men, right? Because they depend on us so much. But it'll help illuminate, okay, what does our process look like, and how can she communicate her own needs to us in a way that we can hear? So those are the sort of things I can help as far as her own just development as a woman. Yeah, I don't know. I think their path is very different in that the path into womanhood is much less intentional and much less just biologically compelled. They go through puberty and their cycle happens every month. We are restarting the baby making process. You didn't have to do anything to make that happen. It just happens. And even the whole journey of childbirth and these like penultimate feminine moments, it is actually a lot of the psychological language around them is well suited. Open up, be vulnerable, embrace the strength that comes through vulnerability, release, let go. All that kind of stuff is actually very helpful to them in those moments.
This is a bit of a side note, but do you think the boss babe phenomenon is a response to lack of masculine leadership among men?
100%. I mean, it's now, having said that, it's not that women don't have a lot to give, right? A lot of talents and whatnot, and want to bring those into the world. But there's just anything that comes that's like overly combative. There's there's almost always underneath that a feminine desire to not have to do that, right? And so when there is a lack of masculine frame around women, they will build that in themselves, but they'll build it in a more defensive way, in a more like cortisol driven, like, I don't know, prey energy kind of like defensive energy around it. Whereas when men are doing that at our best, we've got much more predator energy, much more of like, oh, I'm just exhilarated by the hunt. I'm just going at it with all my heart and I feel alive and I feel great. Whereas women have a lot more of like, I need to do this to be safe. And you talk about shutting their brain off because the brain is thinking of all the things I have to do to be safe and all the things that I have to do to succeed. And if she can like shut all of that off and just rest, it feels marvelous to her.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have two questions left for you. One is, I'm entering the therapy profession. How would you advise therapists when dealing with men? Like, it's a very feminized profession, and I feel like there's just a lot of just uncertainty and often cluelessness about how to deal with men. What advice would you give?
I've heard fantastic things throughout the years. I don't know. There's a couple things come to mind. Men like to be given things to do. Right. We need some sort of a sense of a process and a framework where we see ourselves moving towards a goal. And so if therapy is too self-reflective, if it's too just like looking into your past and your childhood and just trying to understand everything, that doesn't tend to be as helpful for men as, okay, what are the problems in front of you? What are the mindsets you're getting in now? And how can we workshop these things to get better? Where do you want to be? So an analogy I like to give the guys when we get into some of those, oh, it was probably because as a child this thing happened to me. Imagine yourself waking up at the bottom of a pit and there's this like overturned Jeep and you don't remember anything. And you're looking up and you're, 50 feet down this pit. And you've got your hands, nothing immediately broken. And you're tasked with, how do I get out of this pit? Now, the knowing, like piecing together the backstory of how that Jeep got down there and how you were in that situation may have some useful clues for how to get out of the pit. But it's every bit as likely that knowing exactly how it happened wouldn't help you at all. And you're just faced with the task in front of you. And so what I would say to the therapist is maybe there might be a valuable in a shift in focus from digging deep into past patterns and more in like looking at what they're faced with in front of them and giving them the tools and the framework they need to do it. Another thing I would say, and this comes from, Adam Lane Smith?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite quotes from him is that female depression is about feeling unloved and male depression is about feeling powerless. And now you don't want the therapist to go, okay, well, how can we just give them a lot of affirmations? You are powerful. We all think you're powerful. That's not where feelings of power come from, being capable and being competent and having that sort of self-confidence as a man. It comes from going in life and succeeding in some level. And so if a man is going to train his son, he sees his son feeling like a puny weakling in sports or something. What does a good father do? He doesn't just like sit and say, you're good enough. You're good enough. It's like, no, you and I are going to go out in the backyard and practice, and you're going to try to just catch the ball. And every little bit of success you have, we're going to celebrate. And every time you fail, you're going to know why you failed. And that kind of thing ends up building a man up. And so more of that, I think those two things are what immediately come to mind. And how to actually do it in a clinical practice, I don't know. But
yeah, I went through very severe depression for a number of years, and I did a lot of affirmation therapy. Let's boost your self-esteem and do statements of self-worth and all this stuff. And I think it actually made things worse because it felt like I was lying to myself. Nothing helped me more than getting into the gym and starting to feel a little bit of power in myself.
Yep. It's so powerful. Like just in the sort of, like playlists that, I listen to when I'm working out is a lot of those like 80s songs where you have like men cheering other men on, like, when they try to drive you down, you can take it. That don't shake you. When your back's against the wall, you're the thrill of the fight's got you standing tall, and it's just like building you up. And it's not, but none of that means anything if you're not actually pushing the weight while you're doing and feeling the power and seeing those numbers change.
Yeah,
it's incredibly
100%.
like physical fitness is psychologically healing to men.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's, I saw a stat about like men who had committed suicide, and the most commonly used word by these men was the word useless, like feeling useless. And just doing anything to feel like I have like some useless, I mean, even if it's something that's like an artificially created task, like lifting a bench press or something, like I feel like I did something. Like, kind of like you were saying, like a woman needs to feel loved, like a man needs to feel like I'm good for something, that I accomplished something.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And that's really part of what this book is about back here, because we're finding, I mean, again, those weights in the gym don't need to be lifted up. They're fine on the floor. The weight will be fine, as opposed to what our ancestors 200 years ago, those hay bales or whatever, did actually need to get in the barn. But even now that we have machines to do that for us, we find that we need to be doing things like that, or we're not okay. And the same thing is true about male-female relationships. Hey, physically, materially, you may be off where you can both earn two incomes and provide for everything you need, and things are provided for, but she doesn't feel like she can like rest in your strength, like she did, 200 years ago, if all you're doing is like typing little keys and saying, okay, let's order takeout. Right. So we need some of that for our own health with each other.
Yeah, I love that. So my final question for you is, when you look at society more broadly, what is one issue that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more?
Gosh, what are we like? I mean, this is a big one, right? Like just like male-female dynamics are like, we're talking about that a lot online, and it's mostly toxic. I think really the way I would put it is men and women need to fall in love with each other again. Like that's what we need. It's like there's an example that I give is like, in a healthy society, what a woman will say about a man is like, oh, he's doing X, Y. It's so irritating. It's just like a man to do all that. And then she'll smile. That, and it's the same with us. Oh, she did that. My wife did that, or that lady did that. Oh, that's just such a woman thing, such a chick thing to do. It's ridiculous. Right? We need that ethos where it's like, it's different. It obviously clashes. It gets in the way. It gums up the works. And you just gotta love them. Right?
It's frustrating and also attractive at the same time.
Right. And just accept it. Just accept the drama of it. That's sort of the healthiness of male and female dynamics. And so if we can get to that place where we realize that women being more and more themselves as women, and men being more themselves as men, that there is mutual benefit to be found there. This is not a zero-sum game. This is a win-win. And so we need more conversation of how can men and women win together. So that's a big thing. People are talking about just the problem in the general culture, sort of lagging behind the Twitter discourse or whatever. People are just really now starting to talk about, gosh, our boys and young men are in trouble. And so having something to say to that is deeply important. rather than just, and they're really mad. And so how do we placate their feelings of being mad? No, we need actual solutions. We need productive things where men can be excited about and women can see, wow, this is really, really valuable to women if they go on this journey.
Giff, where can people find you?
Right now, best way to find me is x.com/Giff Lasta. That's where I'm the most active. My book there is on Amazon. It's on paperback like you have up there, but it's also on Kindle, and I just recorded the audiobook, so it's on Audible.
Yes,
The Way of Men with Maids.
Love this book, The Way of Men with Maids. Highly encourage to go read it. Thank you so much for the conversation. I'd love to talk to you again anytime.
Anytime, man.